Hey everyone, Kevin here with Victory 4x4. In today's video, we're going to be installing our dash accessory mount here on our 2023 Chevy Colorado ZR2. So here is just a quick look at the dash mount panel itself along with its mounting bracket. We do additionally provide a dual port USB extension. That's what fills the kind of rectangle hole you see here, and there's a couple different options for how you wire that up. In order to get just this installed, it's really pretty quick and easy. However, if you want to run that USB extension, the install gets a little more in depth and there's some disassembly that needs to be done on your dashboard. So we're going to walk you through that the best we can now, as well as show you how to bolt this in. So where this is going to go is actually in behind your display up here. There's a small kind of storage compartment tucked away behind here that this mimics the outline of and kind of fills that void of and gives you a nice discreet place to mount those accessories. Now, to help out with visibility, we removed the rear view mirror. You guys shouldn't have to do that, so don't worry there. This storage compartment, once you get back here, is just held in with 3 plastic clips kind of running vertically down into their locking tabs. We're just using a plastic pry tool to get started and get our fingers behind here to pop this free. So I'm just starting on this forward edge. Once you get your tool behind there, you can kind of gently work your way through, kind of prying up and back. And then once you can get your fingers behind there, you should be able to grab a hold of it and pull up, releasing those 3 tabs. Now, if the only thing you wanted to do was install the mounting bracket or the dash mount, there's 2 screws back in here that can be removed with a 7mm socket that allows you to then bolt this bracket in through these 2 holes, reusing that factory hardware, and then bolt the dash accessory mount down to our bracket, securing it in place and giving you a place to mount your accessories. Again, since we want to run those dual USBs, we have to disassemble this a little further so that we can route those wires. So the 3 screws we need to remove to get this display out of the way all run kind of vertically down behind here. 2 are kind of surface level, if you will, and are very visible right up top. So 1 right here and 1 right here, which we will be able to show you these locations a little bit better once this is out of the way. But the 3rd one is going to be in the large cutout window just to the right of center, down in this location, and you can kind of see just with my ratchet and extension how far down there that is. So that one, we actually, to get it out the first time, loosened it up with this ratchet and then fed a magnet down in to catch the bolt as it came out, making sure we didn't drop it down in the dash. So keep that in mind and go ahead and get all 3 of these removed. Now, with those 3 screws removed, we're going to reach down into the slotted hole behind here so that we can press out kind of as low as possible. And then you don't want to pull out right here on the bottom edge of the screen. You actually want to get in behind the bottom of kind of the switch panel down here. So we're using our plastic pry tool once again for that. We're going to carefully get in behind here. This may take a couple tries, but we'll see. You want to kind of pry out the best you can. It is going to kind of try and lift up, but you're also pulling out and pressing out right here at the same time. You can see how that kind of popped the first clip here, maybe the center one as well, but you do have 1 more clip remaining here, as well as a small one up here tying this in to the main gauge display over in front of the driver. So you may have to use your tool once again, or you may at this time be able to pop that free like I kind of was there. Again, we got to get this top one to pop as well. And then keep in mind when you're doing this that you do have some wiring behind here, so you don't want to pull too far out, damaging any of those wires. Once you got to this point, you have to get your wiring harnesses disconnected. So all 3 of these come apart in a very similar fashion. They just have a small locking tab that you need to push back, ideally with a screwdriver or a small pick. And then there's a small center tab that they're all quite small on these, so I actually have to use the screwdriver to press it down, and then we can pull back on the connector itself, releasing that, and then you can repeat that on the other 2. With this whole display freed up, we can set it off to the side, but at this point you can now see those 3 tabs a little more clearly where the 3 screws run down vertically, securing this in place. At this point we have a little bit better access to our hardware, so we'll take our 7mm socket once again and remove the 2 screws running kind of forward towards the front of the truck up here. From there, we'll grab our mounting bracket and use the 2 empty slotted holes here, along with that factory hardware, to bolt that back in place. From there, before you get that fully tightened down, you want to grab your dash mount, and using the 2 empty holes in the top here, we'll line this up and bolt it in with the 2 1/4 20 button head bolts provided in your bolt pack, along with washers. From there, you'll want a 5/32 hex. I have a T-handle. You could just as easily use an Allen wrench here, and you'll tighten this down, securing it to the mounting bracket, and then pressing that kind of down tight into the cutout here on the top of the dash. You can grab your 7mm socket once again and tighten it back into place. At that point, you want to find your USB extension cable and feed it down through the rectangle cutout in the top of the mount. And you can then snap that down into place. Now when you press this down in, if you notice that it's not sitting kind of fully flat all the way around, it's probably because the wires are running into the plastic in the cutout down here. So in this case, we're just going to mark either side of this, leaving ourselves a little bit of wiggle room on each side. I'm going about 3/16 out past the wires. Then we'll temporarily pull this back out of the way. You can use a lot of different techniques to trim the plastic out of here. I'm just using a good sharp razor blade and a flip out knife. If you have an X-Acto knife, that works pretty well too, but use the tools available to you, and obviously be careful in here, but you should be able to relatively easily kind of shave this plastic material away, making room for your wires. You may have to check that fitment and that clearance a couple times, but once you have enough material removed, go ahead and snap this down in. And then at this point, it's really dependent on you and how you want to wire this up on where you go from here. So how we recommend and prefer to run these typically in most vehicles is we pick up this 12 to 5 volt USB converter. Obviously this is a dual port, so it accepts both of our cables. We then route the cables down into the driver's side footwell area, where we find a safe place to mount this. And then we can bring 12 volt power in to this end of the converter from underneath the hood, so that we can have safe 5 volt power up here at all times, since your factory power port typically is not full-time powered. Now at times, people don't want to do that. They don't necessarily want to route power all the way in from under the hood, and they just want to get these down to the factory power port, which again in this truck is down in front of this shifter. There is a single port down there, so you will have to at the very least get a single to dual USB adapter to accept these. And there's not really a great way to get wiring down to that very cleanly, at least without some drilling or something through components down into here, because when pulling this out down on the bottom, we didn't really find much access from behind it. So if you want to go that route, you do have to do a little bit of kind of discovery disassembly, if you will, to run those cleanly up into that area. Or we know you can safely get through this port and kind of down below the dashboard or down into this driver footwell, allowing you to kind of route the wires somewhat discreetly up along the side and plug them in up here. But again, if you're going that route, that's going to be a little bit in your hands on how you choose to route the wires. So going back to the way we plan to do it with that converter, we are going to actually get a light and set it down in the driver's side footwell, kind of pointing up. That helps you kind of see where you have to guide these through back here in the dash. I've done this once already in our R&D process, so I know and I'm going to be feeding them in to the left a little bit this way, so I can at least get started going in that direction. Now I am going to pull these back out real quick one time just to give you a little tip here. There's pros and cons to this, but you can take both of these cable ends and kind of tape them together. This is just a little bit of electrical tape here, and that way you're not fighting two cords as you're routing them down through the dash. As you can see, that makes this a little bit bigger, so in some spots it might be a little harder to feed it through. So with that back in there, once you have most of your cable fed in, again, some of this you can't see because it's in behind the dash, but there is a spot that it pretty freely falls into down here to the left. You will then have to kind of get out and down in this driver's side wheel well opening so that you can reach up in there and find the other end of the cable. So that part, again, was just a matter of kind of looking around down there with our flashlight and then being able to reach up in and grab the cable ends once you could see them. So you can see I have those fed in down here. We then want to come back up top and just make sure that we have our wires in a position that gives us adequate clearance to get that radio and console reinstalled up here. So make sure that they're not affecting the placement of the factory wiring at all, and make sure they're not in a place where they're going to encounter the actual mounting brackets for that display. Now when putting that display back in, you will have to have the top mount out of the way, but we wanted it in beforehand so that we could set the height of that mounting bracket. So again, it's just the two screws up here, so not a big deal. We'll loosen this up, and then at this time you should still have plenty of slack in your wiring to just kind of lift it up and set it up on the top of the dash. And at that point, we can clip our wires back in and snap this display back into position. Now you shouldn't have to worry too much about making sure that you're putting these in the right place, because they're all kind of color coded and really only fit one way. We can then, using that 7mm socket, reinstall the 3 vertical mounting screws here. Now there's a lot of different ways you can get that center screw back down in there without dropping it or losing it. We've got a pretty strong stick magnet that I'm able to kind of grab a hold of the head on the screw and just very carefully reach it straight down in and get it started. Now if you don't have a magnet that works for that, something else you can do is place the screw in the end of your socket and then just wrap it one time with some electrical tape, making sure you catch the washer fairly well on the end of the screw. That should be enough to allow you to reach it down in and get it started, but then once you get it close to tightening up, you should be able to pull back on your socket and extension and pull that electrical tape free. At this point, you already know how the dash mount installs to its mounting bracket, so slip it back into position and get those 2 1/4-inch bolts reinstalled. So as we get down into the driver's side footwell area, there's a couple things we want to go over. One, I'll just point out roughly where these cables wind up coming down. Essentially, they're just behind the driver's side air duct for the heat and AC. You could also kind of feed them up over the top and get them in between the duct and this front cover panel. Now, I'm able to get in here and kind of lay somewhat on my back and work underneath there in terms of routing and tying these wires up. If you don't want to do that, if you're having a hard time getting in there, these panels are removable as well. This outer panel can simply be popped off by getting in between these edges with your plastic pry tool and pulling it out, because it just has a series of clips around the outside edge. That allows you to access the one fastener up behind here, as well as there's another fastener down here where my thumb's at, as well as a clip over in this general area. And then the rest of it is just perimeter clips, and you can pull this panel free as well. As you can see on ours, it's got a trailer brake controller here, so you will want to pay close attention to that and make sure that you get any wires disconnected before pulling this all the way off. From there, you can see our USB converter now hardwired in over here. So those are wires we have coming from under the hood that go direct to battery power. So we have full-time power at our USB extension up on your dash mount. So from here, it's just a matter of getting these plugged in together. One thing you can do, and that we're going to recommend here, is electrical taping each of these individually and then possibly together as well, just to prevent them from ever wiggling free over time throughout the life of your dash mount. And then it's just a matter of getting all of this safely tied up somewhere that it's not gonna interfere with any moving components or your feet as well when you're in here working the pedals. So for that step, we're just gonna be using cable ties and finding safe locations up under here to get everything tied up. I will point out the way that I was able to pull this power and ground in from under the hood in this case was actually to drill a small hole in the firewall and insert a rubber grommet that will protect those wires over time, as well as hopefully keep things pretty well sealed up. I did that with a right angle drill in here under the dash, kind of out in this driver's side corner. You can use your discretion on what you're comfortable with and what your skill level is on how you want to achieve that. Once you're happy with everything under the dash and you have it all tidied up in there, you can route your wiring out across into the battery and then get it tied in out here. So here we just have an eyelet crimped onto the end of our wire. We also added an inline fuse for some circuit protection, which we recommend you do that as well if you're going to be running full-time battery power. So for this, there is a additional stud on this positive battery post from the factory. You'll just need to source your own M8 by 125 nut to go in that location. You can then get that installed on there for the power side of things. From there, there is a factory ground location right back here on this kind of front to rear core support, if you will, in behind the fender. You can tie into that, you can tie directly to battery negative. It's kind of your preference there, because I know people have a lot of different opinions when it comes to how they want to do their vehicle electrical. At that point, once you have all your electrical finished up in here, you just need to jump back in there and double check that everything's functioning properly up on your dash mount, and that install is pretty much complete. So if you guys have any questions at all about this installation or anything else we offer here at Victory 4x4, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always send us an email at info@victory4x4.com or call us at 269-459-8447.